Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for September 8th through 14th. This week I read 4 books, I watched 2 shows, I watched 3 movies, and I listened to 1 book. I'm home for once, but also I'm upstairs because we're still redoing the garage, which means that a bunch of things from the garage are still in the library downstairs, which means that this is where I'm filming until that is done. Which means that even though I've been told that the people who sleep upstairs can't hear me if I'm in here talking, I don't believe them, because my bedroom is directly below where I'm sitting and I can hear everything down there. So I'm just like, how can you not hear me? I'm so sorry if I'm waking you up. Because I always do this really early, 1, because that's how it fits in my schedule, and 2, because I want to do it before people get woken up and have to listen to me doing this. Anyway, as for the first book I read this week, that is Madame Victoria. This one is translated from French because the author comes from Quebec. And this one surrounds a particular case from Montreal where back in, I believe it was around 2004, if I'm remembering correctly, a unidentified body was found, and it became known as Madame Victoria because it was found by the Royal Victoria Hospital. Again, I believe that's what the hospital was called. And even though they brought in a forensic anthropologist and they did all these other things, they still to this day don't know who that person was. Side note on that, it doesn't tell you by name which forensic anthropologist, but it also mentioned that this person was a novelist. I was like, oh, so Kathy Reichs worked on this case, cool. Because if you don't know, she did at least work in Quebec at the time. In any case, because nobody has been able to figure out who this woman was, this book is basically a series of short stories, kind of guessing as to what her life could have been up until the moment that she died in this forest near the hospital. Some of these stories were a little bit more straightforward, some of them were a little bit more science fiction, and some of them just kind of ignored the facts of the case, like approximately how old this woman was when she died, and that type of thing. And there was one story in particular where the main character of that story's body just changed overnight, which I don't know how to feel about because I myself am not trans, but I could foresee people who are trans looking at that situation and being like, what now? So I don't know if this was misguided inclusion or if people would actually be happy about it. I don't know. I just know that bodies don't just magically change as much as some people would like them to. Overall, this was an interesting collection, so if this premise seems interesting to you, go for it. There's going to be at least one story and probably more than one story that you find interesting. As for the other 3 books I read this week, they were all graphic novels in the same series. It was Berserker Volumes 1, 2, and 3. Previous to putting these on hold, I did not know that Keanu Reeves had written a graphic novel series, and I believe there's a second set of these graphic novels as well as a novel tie-in. These graphic novels are all about this character who you come to find out is about 80,000 years old and can't die. He then, of course, has been used by various military powers across the planet, across the times, to be a secret weapon of sorts. And having had so much practice, he is very good at it. This means this is a pretty action-packed graphic novel series. It's pretty bloody, pretty gory, but then it's also this character trying to figure out why he's the way he is and if he can ever just become mortal, because that's ultimately what he wants. Everyone else around him gets to just live in a certain way that he does not get to do. This then, of course, goes into a lot of the backstory about how this character came to be, and it goes into some weird places from there, let's just say. Definitely an interesting premise, and I was able to just sit down and read all 3 of these graphic novels back to back to back pretty quickly. As for the shows I watched, I started in the 12th season and ended up in the 13th season of Criminal Minds. Wow, a lot of things happened. Also, in this time frame, the team went from being 7 people to 8 people, and only 3 of those people are original to the team from when the series started. However, they did bring back one character who had gone off to do other things and is now part of the team again. Also, something I didn't realize about 10 seasons worth of episodes ago is there was one episode near the time where Rossi joined the team where the victim of the episode was actually played by that actor's daughter, and that's only interesting because she comes back now, and yeah, that's just a thing that I'll say. This was a hard section to watch, only because I have such an intense love for 2 of the characters in particular. Like, I love all of them, but if I had to pick a favorite, I have to pick those 2 as my favorite because I can't pick just one. And one of them was being accused of crimes that were not committed by him, and then the other one looked like she was going to leave the team at some point, and I was like, if that happens, I might not be able to watch the show anymore. Fortunately for me, it did not come to that. I also got super excited at one point because Tracy Toms shows up as a character, and just based on what happened, I can only assume that we will not see her Again, just because her character is no longer needed in the show, which is sad because I like her a lot. This means I'm really creeping up to getting to the current timeline of the show. I think there's 17 or maybe 18 seasons. As my best friend pointed out, Criminal Minds Evolution is not a spin-off, it's just a continuation of this series. So I think that becomes the show name after I think the 15th season or something like that. So I will watch all of this and then I will go back and watch the spin-off seasons. Speaking of, sometimes characters from those shows actually show up in this show, and that's very nice because it's nice to see those faces again. We also finished the first season of The Handmaid's Tale, and of course being a season finale, it leaves you in a place where you're like, what's gonna happen to these characters? And I'm not entirely sure how this show has 5 seasons just based on the book. I don't know if it follows the Testaments after that. I have no idea because I don't look it up ahead of time because I just want to watch it. I've read both of those books, but not for a while. The show definitely plays with power dynamics and how certain characters see certain things, and how some characters think other characters have way more power than they actually have, and it's just fascinating. As for the movies we watched a movie called 13 Ghosts, spelt the most ridiculous way, but only because there was a previous movie of the same title, so I guess they had to spell it in a really ridiculous 1990s, we're gonna put some numbers in there for no reason way. And this one is about a couple of people who are basically ghost catchers, and then one of them dies, and then the other one is owed a bunch of money, and then the first guy's estate actually goes to some family members he hasn't seen in a really long time, and they go to move into his house, which is big and interesting and weird, only to find out that there's ghosts trapped there. And there's a nefarious plot to make something happen with these ghosts. Definitely cheesy, kind of fun. Matthew Lillard is just a delight whenever you see him in anything, so there's that to look forward to if you ever watch this. This week we also watched a movie in theater, and I put on a very specific makeup look for it, which took like 3 minutes. It was the easiest thing I've ever done, but looked really cool. And that's because we were seeing Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I thought this was really fun. Sure, there were certain elements of the plot that didn't super need to be there, but were kind of fun nonetheless. There's also a lot of nostalgia back to the first movie, like the model opening and all of that type of thing. And of course, it's always fun to see a bunch of the cast from the first movie come back for this one so many years later. I did overhear a family member reading about people on the internet being upset that Lydia's dad wasn't there, even though that character is there, but the actor is not utilized. And I thought about it and I went, well, I'm not, because that man has been convicted of some things, and I don't think he deserves to have a paycheck from Hollywood. Just saying. I can't tell you what those things are, platform being what it is, but you can look it up. I'm really glad he wasn't there, but his character was used, because his character was used in some fun ways. And then last night, because we had all watched this sequel, we went back and we just watched Beetlejuice, because we had watched it at least once in this household, but we hadn't watched it for a while, so we wanted to see what things we could pick up that we didn't see as nods in the second one. Usually we would watch it the other way around, but it was actually really fun to go into the second one not having watched the first one super recently. The titular character does not show up for a really, really long time, and that's something I had definitely forgotten about. And it's just such a weird and wonderful world. As for the book I listened to this week, that was The Warm Hand of Ghosts. This one is a dual perspective novel happening during the First World War, and our two perspectives are actually siblings. Our first perspective is Laura. She was a nurse during the war and then actually got injured and was sent back. Home for these siblings is Halifax, and shortly after she was sent back, the Halifax explosion happened, which took the lives of both her parents, and she doesn't know exactly what's happening with her brother because one day some of his things just are mailed to her and she doesn't know how he died in the war because he was off fighting. She decides that she really needs to know exactly what happened to him, so she basically doesn't re-enlist because she can't, but she goes back to the war to work in a field hospital run by somebody she knows. Our other perspective is her brother Fred, and we get to see exactly what was happening to him, which in turn we figure out exactly how she ended up with a box full of his possessions, and the fact that he's got himself in a really strange predicament because basically Fred has been influenced to desert the army and is staying with somebody who is basically the devil, if I had to put a name on him. It's this guy who just wants his memories, just wants him to tell all of his stories, and won't tell you why, but you know it's for nefarious reasons. This book is really interesting because you see these characters really just wanting to get back to each other, but obviously there's something in the way of that, and then set to the backdrop of the World War and knowing that not everyone made it out of that circumstance okay. Despite the popularity of a trilogy written by this author, this is actually the first book from this author I've ever read, and I would be interested in reading more. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!